All right, so I've got a 4-bike rack from JB Racks that I want to assemble and show you guys how easy this is to put together. But first, before we actually open this box, I do want to recommend whenever you put one of these racks together, it's easiest to do this on the hitch of the vehicle you plan on using, or using one of JB Racks shed stands. Today, I'm gonna be using the shed stand because I can just roll it right in here. That way I can record this video for you guys. Now that we got the shed stand in place, let's go ahead and open up the box and get everything sorted so we can easily assemble this. Okay, so whenever you open up your rack, you are going to get a lot of bubble tape in there and some padded foam. Now, before you get started, I would strongly recommend doing what I'm doing here, and that's just lay out all of the parts that come inside this box, making sure that you have everything that's listed in this inventory list on the screen. We're ready to go ahead and assemble this. There's a few pieces that you can identify really quickly. This particular piece right here is actually going to be used for the hitch point. You can tell because of the 3 circles. So the 3 circles will go in just like as if you were to insert this into a hitch and you were going to run a hitch pin through there. If you're using the shed stand, you don't have to use a hitch pin because you've got this little knob right here that will basically thread down and hold this in place while we're installing all the parts. Okay, so next up is grab these 2 plates right here. These are the biggest plates in the box, so you'll see them. They're basically stamped exactly opposite. You're going to want to have the longer bend piece on the outside, and this is going to go into the inside where the hitch actually is. So we're going to use 3 bolts to attach this, and we're not going to tighten this all the way down until we get the upper fully on. So for this next step, you're going to grab the small bag with the little bit thicker bolts. So slide your washers on the bolts. Now you're going to take this first plate and you're going to do this inner smaller bend towards the inside of the actual hitch. So the first one is going to look something like this right here. You're going to have your bolts actually sticking through there. As you can see, this end is sticking over the hitch and this end right here is sticking out away from the hitch. Now we can mount up the other side the exact same way. Now we got this one, we just basically align it the exact same way. Line it up with those bolts, slide that on, and then we're going to take 3 more washers, pop those on, and then you're going to have 3 locking nuts. So for this step, you'll need a 16mm wrench or a power wrench like what I've got here, and then a 6mm Allen key. It does come with the Allen key in the box, but I have some bigger Allen keys here that will make it a little bit easier. So simply take your locking nuts, and we can start tightening these down just a little bit. We don't have to tighten them all the way down just yet. Now the next step is to grab another one of those same bolts and a set of washers and a locking nut. And then inside the bag that came with the large spacers, there's going to be 2 different longer sizes. You're going to want to grab the second to longest size. So not this particular one, but this one here. And we're going to place that in between the 2 plates. Don't tighten it down yet. We'll tighten it down here in just a minute. Okay, at this point, we're going to want to grab these 2 kind of weird looking plates. We're going to install them next. We will have to remove one of the bolts that we installed down at the bottom, but that's super easy since we left them a little bit loose. Okay, so these plates are going to simply just be placed in here just like this. All right, so these plates are pretty much identical. We can just fit one to one side, slide our bolt back through, and we can take the other plate, slide it on. Once we've got that on there, put your washer on and then your locking nut. You can move up to this upper bolt right here. You're going to need to grab another one of these long spacers, just like this. Not the longest one, but the second to longest one. You should have 2 of those. Okay, now we're ready to install the main support beam. So what you're going to need for that is you're going to need the biggest bolt that they have in the bag. So look for the bigger bolt. This is what it's going to look like. And then you're going to have some big washers that go along with it. And of course, you'll have a really big locking nut also. And then also you're going to need these circular plates right here. These will be installed on the inside. This will basically help this thing pivot whenever you need to raise and lower it. And then this right here is, of course, the main beam. Now, whenever you go to install this, take note that the JB Rack logo needs to face out And this notch at the top needs to face back to where your vehicle is. Now grab your large bolt and install one of the washers, and you're gonna put it through one of the sides. Then take your circular spacer and you're gonna install that. Now we're ready to go ahead and install the middle beam. You're basically going to find the large hole at the bottom. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And it's good that we didn't actually install these bolts too tight, because we need just a little bit of space. You don't want that to actually slide that spacer down. So just get this put in here to where you can get that bolt put through the hole. And once we get that through there, we're then going to want to go ahead and install our spacer on the other side. Have one of these ready. This is a rack pin. Just open this up and then pop it through this top hole here. Now that you've got the pin through here, you don't have to worry about the top hole actually falling down while you're trying to install this, especially if you're doing this by yourself. Then take your other spacer and we're gonna slide it in on this side. And then we're gonna take our washer, install it there, and then we can put on our locking nut. So the bolt that actually goes through the pillar here is really big. The only wrench that I actually have that fits it is a 15th 16th. Now this one you don't want to tighten down all the way, because this is actually a pivot point. So we kind of want to leave that just a little bit right before snug. Now we are good to go ahead and start tightening down all these bolts. Okay, so the next step is going to be installing the lower arm right here. And you're going to need a couple of pieces for that. You'll see this kind of weird U-shape looking one. You're going to need this one, and then you're also going to need these two that have these L pieces of aluminum right there. But first off, the first thing that we're going to install are the two plates that actually hold this all together. And this is also where we're going to break into our basically larger bag of bolts that have a little bit smaller in size. So take this L bracket right here, and you're going to actually place the L to the back, and then you'll just slide through one of your bolts all the way through to the other side, and then you'll slide the next one right through. Once you've got that lined up, grab another set of washers and a set of locking nuts, and then grab your other L bracket, and you'll just place it on the other side of those bolts. And these we can go ahead and tighten down. And this locking nut size is going to be a 13 millimeter. Switch this out. And the Allen key size is going to be 5 millimeter on these bolts. Now with these, you don't want to tighten them down too tight. You want to just have them nice and snug. They're locking nuts, so they're not going to go anywhere once you've got them to a certain thread point. And you don't want to squeeze this too hard, because it can dent this in. So just make sure you tighten these down snug and not too tight. So now you want to take one of the lower portions here, make sure that these L pieces are facing outwards, and they're going to be opposite. So they're going to meet up right here. And then you're going to thread these bolts basically through here onto this plate. But you need to thread them through this U-shaped one first. So simply just attach that to one of them, slide the bolt through, and then slide it through the back, and then have another one handy so you can do the exact same thing right here, and it'll kind of hold it in place while you get your washers and your locking nuts to hold it secure. Take this same piece, again, making sure that these aluminum pieces face outwards, and you'll slide this in here just like this. And it should meet up with that other piece. And then you should be able to take your bolt, thread it on the outside one, pop that on there like that, and then you should be able to thread on your other one right through here. Okay, and then what I like to do, just make sure these are pushed all the way in together, and then we can go ahead and tighten them all the way down. Just get it nice and snug. You don't need to over tighten it. And there we go, our lower piece is fully attached. Okay, so the next step is attaching the upper plates. This will take quite a few bolts, so get ready to have those all prepared. Okay, so now that you've got your two upper pieces right here, these plates, one of them is gonna have a notch. This is gonna face backwards towards the back of the rack, and then this one's gonna go in the front. Let's go ahead and get our bolts ready and get this installed. Okay, first thing to note is that you do have these little notches right here. They'll line up with kind of tabs that are on the rack. You'll just simply slide that in place. Then you're gonna take your other plate right here. You're gonna align that up front, Now do take note, inside that bag full of a whole bunch of bolts, you're gonna have one that's a lot longer than the other one. That's gonna be used for this next step. Now the longer bolt is gonna be used on this bottom hole right here, so make sure you put a washer on it, and then that should slide all the way through the back plate and then all the way through the back of the main support. Attach a washer and then a locking nut. Okay, for the next step, you're gonna wanna make sure you line these up correctly. The easiest way to do this is you're gonna have a larger diameter tube here along with two smaller ones. You'll see some offset holes on both of the kind of smaller tubes, and then you'll also see some bottom slots right here on the bigger one. So on your bigger piece right here, you're gonna take those two slots and align them with the notch on the very top of the rack. So now grab one of your smaller pieces here. You're gonna see these kind of offset holes. You're gonna wanna line them up with these holes here, and then make sure you have an actual bolt with a washer on it ready to go. Line these up in here, and you'll see those offset holes kind of line up, but also you're gonna feel it stop because it stops on those notches. I'm gonna go ahead and try to line this up with this hole here. Pop this all the way through to the other side. And with another bolt, go ahead and slide it through these kind of offset holes right here. And then this should stabilize this to where you don't have to hold it with both hands. Okay, once you got those two on, let's go ahead and get the other side on, and then we'll start putting on the rest of the bolts. Go ahead and line up whatever bolt hole you want. I'm gonna go with one of the offset ones, and then I'll go with this other one over here. Again, nothing is tightened down fully on the top up here yet. Okay, we can go ahead and put some bolts in these other two holes over here. Now what I like to do is I like to go ahead and start installing my wheel hoops. That way I can make sure everything is lined up right, and if I need to wiggle this just a little bit to make sure that everything is set up properly, I can, and then we'll go through and we'll tighten everything down. Now, when installing the wheel hoops, just make sure that this little hook right here is facing out away from your vehicle, and it's basically going to look something like this right here. So we're just gonna grab a couple of bolts and washers, and we'll basically get these things installed. And as you're installing these, just make sure that they are facing the same direction. You don't want to install one of these backwards. Okay, so now that we've got all the wheel hoops put on, let's tighten those down first, and then we'll go through and add the extra bolts to the top bar and tighten down all those bolts. And again, you're gonna need a 13mm wrench or socket, and then you're gonna need a 5mm Allen key. Now we just need a few more bolts. There's a couple of holes right up here that you can simply just drop some bolts down in. This will just give it a little bit more secure hold on this top bar. After all, this is where all your bikes are, so you definitely want to have a nice secure hold on where your bikes are actually hanging from. So these four that I just put in will basically drop down into these little notches right here, similar to how this did. So basically it locks that bar into place into this and holds it nice and tight. Battery died, so we're gonna switch over to another power tool here, my impact. Just be a little bit careful with this one. At this point, I would just go through and make sure you tighten everything nicely. Now the next step is if you're gonna be installing the slow fold strut, these triangular pieces are gonna be what you're gonna wanna use next. And you're gonna wanna install them on the top two holes here, not these 4 bolts up here. So to install this, we'll just grab 2 bolts, 4 washers, and 2 locking nuts. The triangular piece is going to be facing back, and then I recommend actually going with the far holes to install these so the triangular piece sticks out further. Now you will get 2 of these kind of locking pins, and what I recommend doing is I like to install one of them in front, and it kind of stabilizes the rack. It puts a kind of a wedge between the front of it and the back of it making this a little bit more stable. And then if you want to lower this, you're going to have to remove 2 of these pins, which is super easy to do. But I like to have this one up here, just added stability and less worry that if something were to go wrong with this rack, I've got a pin right there preventing the rack from coming down. Now you can grab your bag of accessories. This is going to have all the end caps and everything that we're going to make this rack look a little bit more finished in the end. So you'll have stuff like this. We'll just pop these in on the end caps. Now you'll have a couple of different sizes, a bigger one and then a couple of small ones. The smaller ones are going to go on the ends here. You don't really need any tools to push these in. They're real easy to push in. You're also going to have a little kind of rubber grommet, and it's going to plug up some of the holes along the rack. You'll have a couple back here. You'll just basically pop them in the little holes in the back. This is what one of the holes looks like right here. You'll have another one down here that will plug one of these plugs into. And then you'll have a big end cap for the front right here. And then the last thing that we need to install are the pedal straps. They just come in this bag right here, and you just basically undo them and we'll slide them through a couple of slots down here. Now also inside the bag full of the kind of end caps, you're gonna have these little circle ones. They're gonna look just like this. These are gonna actually plug into the wheel holders. Just take your time with them and they'll pop into place. Once you kind of get them going, if you can't push them in by hand, you can get like a rubber mallet and help push them in. But I'm finding that you can just simply just push them in by hand. And then lastly, we'll install our wheel straps. We're gonna just simply hook those just like this, circle side up on that hook. Now your JB rack is fully put together, ready to be put on your vehicle. Let's go ahead, take this outside, load it up with some bikes, and hit the road.